Hey, Ryan here. Today I want to talk about configuring your bindplane agents as an aggregator. And so the bindplane agent, a distribution of OpenTelemetry, can really run in two modes. You can operate it at the edge, where it's running on the host that it's collecting telemetry from, or you can operate it as an aggregator, or sometimes referred to as a gateway, where it is collecting telemetry from other agents over OTLP and then forwarding that data on to perhaps another aggregator or to the final destination. So I want to talk about what these architectures look like, why you might want to use one, and I'll show you some diagrams and we'll talk about configuring it in bindplane. So this is a very, very simple diagram. Here we are collecting Nginx logs from Nginx web server, and we've got a bindplane agent sitting on that server. It's collecting logs and metrics, shipping them to Google and Grafana. And so this agent is being configured by bindplane, and it's just going direct to the destinations. This is the simplest way to get started. In a small environment, this can work great. But in a larger environment, or for some of the reasons we're going to talk about, you might want to insert an aggregator or a gateway collector in the middle here. And when you do that, it's going to look something like this. And so I'm sure you're asking, well, why would I want another jump here? Why do I need to put in another collector? And there's a few reasons for that. So let's talk about those. One is isolating backend credentials. And so these systems, all of your edge systems, you may or may not want to actually have credentials configured for Google, for Grafana on those systems. You want to keep them isolated to a small number of systems. So your agent, your aggregator agent, can be that system, and now you just have those credentials here. They're not over here. So that's an excellent reason to introduce an aggregator. Another reason is to offload processing. So depending on what you're collecting from, these systems may or may not have very many resources. What's great about this flexibility is if they do have a lot of resources, you can do processing at the edge, and you can take advantage of those resources. But if they don't, then you can use a beefier system here and do your heavy processing at the aggregation level. So offload processing is an excellent reason. Network security. So quite often, these devices don't have, or you wouldn't want to give access to the internet. And so you can set up your aggregators within a DMZ, so they only have access to the outside internet. These devices do not. They're just sending internally over OTLP. So network security is another great reason. 4 is governance of your telemetry pipelines. So the observability team often wants to be able to control what other teams are sending. A very simple example is you've got an application team that configures a collector, and all of a sudden they're sending info logs and just flooding your system with info logs that you don't need, right? So how do you prevent these kind of things? Well, one way is the observability team can manage these central aggregators, put in place processors that do that filtering, and then with RBAC controls in bindplane, require these teams that are managing your edge devices to send to the aggregators. They can't send to any other destinations. They have to go through the aggregator that's managed by the observability team. So this becomes a great way to enforce policies as you need to. So there's lots of other reasons you might want to insert an aggregator, but those are a couple, some of the most common that we see. Okay, now let me show you how to configure this in bindplane. It's really easy. Again, looking at the same basic configuration that we just outlined, I've got Nginx logs going to our aggregator. Okay, if I click on the aggregator, I need to configure a few things. The protocol I want to use, gRPC is generally recommended. Stats demo is the host name of this aggregator, and then just the port. And if I go look at another configuration, this is the aggregator configuration. So going back to our diagram here, this is this guy. The listen IP address, so this is just going to listen on all IPs, the port, and that's it. So very, very simple to get started. Here I've got just a simple severity filter in place, but this is, like I said, where you can offload heavier processing, start to enforce those policies, and so forth. So I hope that was helpful. Pretty easy to get started. We've got a lot of great content on our blog. I'll link to below on how to do this and configure it in a more advanced environment. And of course, if you have any questions, reach out to us on Slack or via email. We would love to help. And I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.